never occurred to me that a book about mountain biking and trout fishing and camping and existential philosophy was going to be like vibing with the 80-year-old set. They love it. And the reason is I've had so many come to me and say things like this. When I retired, my society told me I didn't matter anymore. But that's the success logic, right? Because you matter because of your successes. Now you're not out there checking boxes. You're not making stuff happen and your hustle's over. Now you're irrelevant. Now you're useless. That's what our society tells retired people. And they say, but when I listen to you talk, when I read this book, it reminds me that faithfulness was never reducible to my job. I'm going to get out of bed every day and do the best I can to live in a direction that makes a difference.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're going to do a great job.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we connect men in pursuit of their potential. Join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, before we jump into the episode, I want to encourage you to take your personal and professional growth to the next level by liking and hitting that subscribe button to the podcast to get a new episode each and every single week. Also, hit that share button and don't forget to check out the Noble Knights, where you can find a group of men and get that support, accountability, and mentorship you need to achieve your goals. Join us and become a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to elevate their capacity for life. I'm excited to get some wind in our sails today. It is my pleasure to have philosopher, fisherman, mountain biker, husband, and father, Dr. Aaron Simmons on the podcast, author of Camping with Kierkegaard, available now, Faithfulness as a Way of Life. Dr. Simmons, man, thanks for being on.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. I'm a huge fan of the stuff you're doing, and it's been my honor to meet with the Noble Knights. So let me just echo your encouragement to folks to get plugged in. What an amazing community that is mutually beneficial. So absolutely, man, big fan of what you're up to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Dr. Simmons, I think a lot of our listeners are really going to resonate with what we touch on here in the book, Camping with Kierkegaard. But before we do that, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak directly to them in your own words, your own voice, give you the reins, if you would, of the show, and let you speak directly to the audience. So please introduce yourself in your own words, and we can kind of hop into our conversation right after.
Yeah, no, sounds fantastic. So yeah, my name is Aaron Simmons. All of my work is under J. Aaron Simmons. And the reason for that is because my dad's name is John and my name is John. And so I use the J as a kind of honor to my father whenever I publish. And so if anybody's wondering why that's there, it's a little modern man and the legacy that we pass down from generation to generation. But yeah, I'm a professor of philosophy at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and specialize actually in philosophy of religion and political philosophy. But about 4 years ago, decided to switch gears a little bit. I had published a dozen books that were high-level academic, unreadable sorts of things, and decided that philosophy needed to speak to where we are, to our current circumstances and the human condition more broadly. And so I started a YouTube channel, Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves. Hopes folks will check that out. I also started a Substack called Philosophy in the Wild, and I do 2 essays a week there. Anybody who's a fan of 90s hip hop, I actually do a Music Mondays series there, which my affinity for 90s hip hop shows up pretty strongly. But yeah, so my Substack, my YouTube, and then I wrote a book that was meant to be for a general audience, inviting people to not so much learn from me, but think with me about stuff that matters. And so this book is, at its most basic, a personal account of the way in which I shifted focus from being career driven, success being the real, motivation, following the 2 Chainz, money's the motivator. I went from that and flipped over to a sense where faithfulness, being consistent, risking myself in a direction that I think matters, and trying to answer the question, what's worthy of my finitude? In other words, given that I don't have an unlimited amount of time, what can I do on purpose with the time that I have? And so I went camping, mountain biking, trout fishing. I took my son with me on these trips. And this book is a kind of recollection about how I shifted in my focus, found joy in the midst of a world marked by despair. And I draw heavily on philosophy, but also on hip hop and popular culture and my experiences in the outdoors to invite folks to go camping with me as we think about, the trails of life and how to walk them a little bit more effectively. So yeah, I hope folks will check out the book, hop over to YouTube, check out the Substack. Would love to connect with them in all those places.
Yeah, and honestly, I will echo that sentiment as well for everybody, and we'll have another opportunity to share those links at the end of the episode as well. But I gotta say, in the years we've been able to engage with each other and talk with each other, Dr. Simmons, you've always given me insights on how to think, not what to think, and I think that's so important because so many of us, I call it asking for permission. Oftentimes, like we ask for permission for a conclusion. We ask for permission to do something we already know. We spend most of our time with ourselves, yet we'll ask somebody else if we want to do something we actually want to do, right? But I love the fact that you lead the reader down almost a trail of questions, breadcrumbs of questions, if you would, to help unpack the questions for someone. And one of the questions you said, which was something that I wrote down, is, what is worth your finitude, right? And with risk with direction, that's faith. You write that in the book. Talk more about that in terms of what is worth your finitude, what that means, and how risk with direction comes into play there.
Yeah. So in the book, I describe a distinction between two different ways of approaching life. I call one success and the other faithfulness. And this is not to say that I am opposed to people being successful. As I have told many audiences, if any of y'all are just sitting on an extra Audi R8 with the V10 and you just want to give it to a philosopher, like pass it on over. So I got no issues with people being successful and being strategic and logistically aware of what success requires. However, think about how many of us let this idea of success define our existence, right? We are, living a life that is worthwhile because I got that car, that job, that relationship, that promotion, whatever it is. And the problem with that, of course, is if we are defined by those successes, these external achievements that can be like boxes we check off on our 5 and 10-year to-do list, then the problem becomes, if we check all the boxes, well, I guess we hope we get hit by a bus, right? Because if our whole focus was doing that stuff and we did that stuff, well, now what? And the problem is we can get addicted to the next thing, the new step, the next achievement, so that we're never actually happy. We keep saying to ourselves, if only I can do this, then I'll find joy. If only I can do that, then I'll be content. And the problem is we won't be. And this is not new wisdom. I mean, this is ancient stuff, right? Saying if you find your value and your meaning and your purpose in external achievement, those external achievements will never satisfy the existential longing for, being okay with yourself. Yeah. Alternatively, what if we don't check all those boxes? Well, now we feel like a failure, right? So notice neither of these are real good outcomes. So the success orientation is not saying, hey, all that matters is success. What it's telling us is you matter because you are successful. And if you aren't successful, something's wrong with you. And I'm trying to invite all people, right? But of course, the audience of this podcast, men, to rethink success as giving their lives significance. Much more important, I think, is this idea of faithfulness, which says, go be successful, but don't let it define you, right? Strive for stuff. And if it turns out it doesn't work out, cool. You aren't a failure, right? That's not what defines you. Instead, risk with direction is what faith is about. So given that we are finite, just means we're gonna die. Given that we're limited, given that everything we ever do has a, use by date, well, everything we do is risky, right? Talking to you right now means I'm choosing not to spend time with my son. Choosing to talk with you means I'm not on a mountain bike or I'm not feeding the poor. Like by definition, if we were infinite, if we were unlimited, I could talk to you for 1,000 years and still have infinity to go feed the poor and ride mountain bikes and do other things.
Mhm.
Given that we aren't that way, risk is real. Our decisions mean we are choosing what's worth our time. And so the idea is inherit and inhabit that risk by choosing on purpose the direction of your life, your action, and your investment. And when we do this, we shift from success being about this, I am X, Y, and Z, to faithfulness being, I'm becoming X, Y, and Z. So the example I give sometimes is success would say, be a good father. Well, awesome. You have that great fathering win on a Tuesday, right? I know you've got a young daughter. I've got a teenage son. It's the amazing day. Ice cream all day long, laughter, fun. They go to bed and look and say, man, I love you so much, Daddy. And so you leave the room, breathe out heavily. What an amazing day. And you leave your family because you don't want to mess up the success. That's insane, right? Becoming says it's not about being a good father. It's about every day being invested in the riskiness of the direction of faithfulness to your family. And every day there will be some good ones, there will be some bad ones. It's not about being, it's about constantly becoming who I hope I will have been. And that idea is why I just think, look, success, it's logistics. You want to go to law school? Fantastic. Take some law courses in college, right? You want to own your own business? Awesome. Probably should learn about personal finance and profit loss statements. But those don't define you. Those are just logistical requirements for the thing that you would like to make happen. But faithfulness says whether or not that stuff transpires, are you becoming the person you hope to have been? Are you, as Maya Angelou says, the kind of person that when your name is mentioned, other people say, oh, bless their heart, I like that guy, right? Or, as she also says, are you the kind of person when your name's mentioned, she's like, oh, damn, oh, hell, not that one again. And so in the book, the whole point is how do we try to become someone who is not finally defined by external achievement, but instead marked by this constancy of being invested in what matters, despite the fact that there were other options for our direction. It's not, and this is where you're right to say, it's not telling you what to think. It's trying to invite you to think in ways that let those what's be on purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe put it in a last thing I'll say on that is like, it's an LL Cool J lyric that always comes back to mind where he says in his song, doing it well, right? I'm doing it and doing it and doing it well. For me, the point is, but I'm not telling you what to do. I'm trying to tell you whatever you think's worth your time, energy, and life, do it well. Right?
Yeah.
And if you do it well, it's not about checking the box. It's about ever more being invested in that excellence. And that's the really point of faithfulness as a way of life.
Almost who you become in the doing is more important what it is you're actually doing. And
that's right.
I wrote down the question before I asked the question I asked, but in terms of identity, because early on in the preface, I believe you mentioned, you say, I'm not only a philosopher. And I imagine the identity plays big into this because for anyone chasing success, any guy watching who probably has a very strong definition of themselves as a business owner, business operator, they work extra hours and might not recognize their procrastinating their time at home because they have clear definition of their job, but at home they don't have the same clear respect and definition, and they're washing dishes and changing diapers and doesn't feel the same. How does the identity piece come into play? Like, how does that CEO, that business owner, not only take the pride in that job role, but also come home taking that pride in the diapers and the dishes?
Yeah. So it's weird, right? We live in a society defined by a success orientation that generally says one of the first questions that we ask of each other when we are meeting someone new is about the role they play as a money-making adult, right? When I say, oh, Ted, it's good to meet you. Now, what do you do? Right? Now notice that question could be answered in 1,000 different ways, right? I mean, my personal favorite is best I can. I think that's always the right answer. Now, what do you do? The best I can. but notice the way we immediately understand it is, oh, I'm a professor of philosophy. Oh, I'm an anchor on this news station. Oh, I'm a business owner, right? Whatever it is that we take to be our core of our identity, we present as the doing of our behavior. And part of what I want to suggest is that's fine. It's just a really boneheaded way to reduce your identity, right? So I'm a philosopher, but I'm also a father, a son, a husband, a mountain biker, right? I just got back from a week mountain biking downhill trails up in West Virginia, messed up my knee. It was amazing. And the whole time I'm thinking, hey, how is this going to then stimulate new content for the book I'm working on? How is this something that I can then translate into invitations to my son to ride with me? Like it's not one thing over here. I go work so that I can care for my family. It's no, my work is part of what it means to be relationally invested as also a member of a family. And the point is, you're not, I mean, think about this, like you're not a better person because you are a father, right? Mm-hmm. But you're a sucky person if you disregard your responsibilities as a father. And so it's not trying to say, do these things, be this person, right? It's trying to say, are you okay with who you're becoming? And that's the question I tend to ask folks, right? What do you do? Oh, I'm interested in your interests. When you say, oh, I work in journalism, cool. I've now got a frame of reference by which to try to get to know you. But another question beyond that is, you cool with yourself, man? Like, are you good? Which is a different question. And it's a question, especially men in our success-driven culture want to answer, I'm good, just look at my new Porsche, right? Mm-hmm. But what if we started thinking, oh, so you're now more in debt than you can sustain? I wonder if that's going to end up wrecking your marriage. Like, we don't immediately go there. We go to jealousy and wishing I had a Porsche instead of being able to say, look, man, like that's cool. If that's a thing you want, if that's a thing that is important, go get it. Don't expect me to think you're better, though, than the janitor at your company who might actually have better contentment, better fulfillment, and actually be able to answer, yeah, I'm good, with sincerity.
Yeah.
Right? Your position does not define you. Your investment in excellence regarding that position is the task.
Yeah. I highlighted this in the book, and it's in chapter 2, and regardless of any avenue someone chooses for themselves and they want to regard themselves in excellence. I wrote down the metaphor of the mountains.
Yeah.
And there's no potential for greatness without the risk of disaster. There's no vulnerability if everything is already perfected.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome, right? Part of what I love about going mountain biking, and this is true also of, camping and fishing and all the other things I enjoy doing, but when I go mountain biking, in fact, just this week, I'm standing at the top of this one trail, and this is the trail that the World Cup downhill pros ride. And I'm sitting up there at the top with, these 4 friends of mine, all guys, and we're standing there, and we're like, man, I don't know about this one, right? Like we're all in our 40s. Dudes riding this are like 27 and professionals. I don't know. And yet it was one of those things where it's like, you know what? Let's go slow. Let's go check this out. Let's see what we can do. And so the point was not, let's run down here ignoring the risk. No, this could kill us. Like literally, I remember talking to one of my friends and I said, man, the 26-year-olds both are not paying their own health insurance probably. And they also probably aren't leaving somebody fatherless if it goes wrong, right? So we become more aware of risk as we become more embracing of responsibility. And so we went down that trail. But as we went down the trail, there were a couple spots. We're like, nah, I'm going to skip this. And then I've got another friend who's like, nah, I'm going to hit this one. Because we've got a little bit different relationships. We've got different skill sets. But never was there oh, you wimp, what's your problem? Step it up, man. Like, never. What there was encouragement to think well about what we faced. And the only time that we were telling each other what to do was this one 25-foot gap. So you're going, off of a rock, 25-foot ravine, landing on the other side. So this is one, if you miss it, like you're at least going to the ER, right? Like that's best case scenario.
Yeah.
And so my buddy Dustin, he was like, y'all get out your cameras. I'm going to hit this one. And all of us looked at Dustin. We're like, man, this ain't the one. Like, this is a bad idea. Now, we can't make him not do it, but we all contributed to him thinking about the risk is too high on this, man. I don't know. Thankfully, he did not hit it. We had a wonderful time. Nobody went to the ER, right? So the mountains, if we are not aware that they will break us, we should not try to ride them. Right? But we can ride mountains. We can surf waves. If we realize that the ocean is stronger than we are, the mountain will always win. And so this kind of like sad, pathetic attempt that many men have to like be immortal. If I can just get enough money in the bank, if I can start this company, if I can exit a billionaire, whatever it is, I will be immortal. No, you won't. You, like Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of freaking Rome, who says, remember, I too am mortal. Memento mori. And he hired somebody, actually. He had a servant walk behind him saying, memento mori, memento mori. Remember you're mortal. Remember you're finite. Remember that you are fallible. Risk is real, right? That's what we need friends to help us understand. That's what we were helping Dustin understand. Yeah. But then Dustin helps us understand sometimes we're better than we think we are, right? It's that push and pull without ever pressuring people to think only if you hit this jump, are you a man? Are you really cool? No. We've got to get away from thinking the accomplishment marks our integrity and marks our worth. That's just false. And unfortunately, a success logic by definition says, if you hit that feature, if you make that jump, if you surf that wave, if you found that company, then you will have lived a life worthwhile. And that's not only false, I think it is what leads to so much despair and robs us of the lives that we actually could live.
I'm curious as to what that false goose egg is, that pursuit that we're going for, the pursuit that has us chase that bigger wave, that has us look for that steeper trail. And I've been the same person who might, you want to feel the edge. You want to feel the edge a little bit, but sometimes you get too comfortable with the edge and you slip up a little bit. But what has us innately chase that edge, right? It's important to be aware of the risk.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Thayton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com. Even with the awareness of it, a lot of us still chase the edge. Why?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think that important, like part of why I'm trying to get people to realize faith is not, belief without good evidence, like you'll sometimes hear in churches, right? We have faith because you can't prove it. I'm suggesting, and this is an existential philosophy idea, that faith is simply the embrace of the riskiness of whatever we choose, whatever we affirm, and whatever we do. And once you recognize that risk is not something we can avoid, right? It's unavoidable, because if you say, I'm going to stay at home and never go outside, I don't want to risk getting anything, I don't want to risk dying. Well, it turns out you'll just die at home, never
Mhm.
having lived. And so the philosopher and writer Henry David Thoreau says at one point, the worst thing would be to come to the end of your life realizing you had never yet lived, right? So I see the chasing the edge as a really deeply importantly human characteristic. It's good that we chase that edge. It's bad when we think the further the edge becomes, the better I am as a human, right?
Mhm.
That's where we start making it competitive. So C.S. Lewis says at one point that competition is the philosophy of hell. And this is probably difficult for a lot of men who have not only, been athletes often or have then seen themselves as entrepreneurs about, surviving in the marketplace or beating out the competition. But think about what it would look like if we said, look, sometimes there is competition just because of the nature of the circumstance, the nature of the game we're playing. But I'd rather play, tennis, let's say, where I'm not trying to be the best at this. I'm trying to be in the game with the best. Right.
Mm.
Now, certainly, if I'm playing a game versus you, like I'm going to do my best to win the game because that's part of what it means to play. But I can always win if I play crappy players, right? So winning can't be something we celebrate by definition. We've always got to say, but did you play people worthy of your engagement,
Yeah.
right? And that's where I think don't confuse chasing the edge as being better than. See instead, risk is persistent and constant in life. What risks am I willing to take because of the life I want to have lived?
Mm.
For some people, that might involve, some steep mountain biking stuff, which I think is kind of cool. For other people, it might involve, super high risk investments in the stock market, which is something I'm not willing to do, right? Like there are different places where that risk plays out. I've got a buddy who has gone all in to real estate and pulled all his money out of the market. He's like, you know what? That's where I want to play. I'm like, man, that seems like a risky venture. And he's like, yeah, but there's risk everywhere. So that's where I'm going to go in. I was like, cool. So it's not about that's wrong. It's where are you willing to do and invest in that risk relative to the kind of life that you want at the end of things to be able to say that you lived.
Yeah.
Right. So I got no interest in hitting that 25-foot gap jump because my direction is I'd like to still be mountain biking at 60.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely amping up the risk a little bit as I go because I don't want to say, oh, I've been riding since I was 40, but I only ever rode, the rails to trail swamp rabbit here in Greenville, South Carolina. That's all paved. But hey, I'm faster than most people on there. Yeah, most people on there are like 87 riding recumbent bikes. That's not a competition, right? So finding a way to say, are you okay with yourself? And are you okay with the risks that you're taking because it's defining a life you want to have lived? Not, I took greater risks, therefore I'm a better person. That's just a false conception. It's a bad way to live.
Yeah. A couple quotes or a couple insights I think of from what you said was there's a quote I've heard. It says, don't cautiously travel through life to safely arrive at death. And
Love it.
A depiction of heaven and hell. And St. Peter opens up the doors to hell, and everyone's sitting at this large dinner table with this huge feast in front of them, but they're all skinny and malnourished and starving. And they each have a spoon in their hand. Have you heard this before?
No, I haven't. This is new.
They have a spoon in their hand, and though they're sitting in front of a table full of food and a spoon in their hand to eat it all, the spoon is longer than their arms, and they can't put the food in their own mouth.
Oh, wow.
He closes the door. He opens the doors to heaven. And it's the same table, same exact spoon, same length, but everybody's full. The only difference is everybody in heaven is feeding each other.
That's smart.
So
I like that a lot, man. Yeah, that's right. Well, and in the book, I talk a lot about you can't live faithfully without realizing you are always implicated and responsible for others. And so it we talk about this in the mountains a lot by the phrase share the trails, right? And so if I'm going to go mountain biking right after it's rained, that's like not a thing we do, because you're going to tear the trails up. And so then everybody gets trails that are less good. You start messing up the trails. And you say, oh yeah, but I want to go mountain biking. You're like, well, but today you're going to recognize I've got obligations to the whole community, right? And part of what I think really, and this may tread on some toes, but philosophers do that a lot. I think one of the dangers of the way that we think about entrepreneurial living, which I'm a big fan of being an entrepreneur. I think, again, like early hip hop was the greatest entrepreneurial spirit in recent memory. I think philosophers have always been saying, but how could we do it different? I mean, they are the disruptive business practice thinkers through history, right?
Yeah.
But one of the dangers of entrepreneurship, as it's currently understood, is we tend to think that it's always about how is it that I can position myself in a way that then is minimizing others, right? And we call this, well, it's just the market. This is the way it works. I can only succeed if others are, failing. But what if we started thinking instead about how do I make myself bigger? We started thinking about things like, am I bringing value to human existence by starting this company? Yeah. Right? Not just, is there money to be made, right? There's money to be made doing all kinds of immoral stuff, but are you really bringing value? And when you start saying, I'm bringing value to people, then we can also start thinking about, is everyone in my business or all of my employees able to live a life of meaning, purpose, and flexibility? Have I invested them with agency? Or am I the kind of boss who says, to maximize profits, I've got to minimize, returns to other people? Yeah. Well, again, you might exit richer, but it comes at the cost of denying your humanity. And I just think that's deeply, deeply flawed. So I'm a fan of thinking about capitalism as an invitation to recognize, as my friend talks about it in a book called Assholes, capitalism should raise all boats. But the problem is it lifts the yachts and swamps the dinghies. So how is it that we can start saying it's not okay that I be rich while poverty remains a reality for other people who share the human condition with me, right? How is it that I can be invested in a moral community far bigger than my political loyalties or, views, right? That's where we start realizing nationalism is morally evil because it denies the humanity of people who don't live within the boundaries of your geographic region. We are implicated in each other because there is no way to live as an island. You are always social. You are always obligated and invested in others. And so figuring that part out, now the risk returns, right? Am I going to, feed the poor or go to the office? Well, it may be the case that going to the office is part of how I'm feeding the poor because we're thinking about systemic realities. We're thinking about justice as a business model, right? That's where I want entrepreneurs in the world. I just want them also to have taken some philosophy courses, right? Don't just take business classes and think you're good. That has narrowed the scope of the risk that you understand, and it has reduced, likely, the way that you understand your responsibilities to a broader human condition.
Yeah, and I think this transitions perfectly because I know you touch on solitude in the book, aloneness, and being social, and in terms of relationships, I did want to touch on that because you mentioned a couple of times camping with your son, and in the book you mentioned your relationship with your father as well.
Right.
I'd love for you to touch on that, the relationship with your dad and with your son, and how this book kind of bridges the gap between the two.
Yeah. So I had a former student of mine who I've gotten fairly close to over the years, and she actually wrote an endorsement for the book. She's now finishing grad school and doing amazing things of her own. But she said when she read the book that she said it is a love letter to your father written to your son. And it never occurred to me that that's what I was doing, but I think she's right. This book is in many ways my attempt to try to remind myself that I'm trying to be like my dad. Now, and that's not true for a lot of people, right? A lot of people have assholes as fathers, and reminding themselves, what about that guy is not what I want to define my own life, is just as much the same task, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I took up this awareness, it actually helped me then say, am I becoming the kind of father, the kind of example to my son that my dad was for me? And sadly, though I don't think I've ever been a bad father, I've never been abusive. I'm not struggling with certain types of vices that could be very dangerous as an example to my son. But like, I worked 80 to 100 hours a week for the first decade of my son's life.
Yeah.
And so when he was 7, he told me that he didn't want to be a philosopher because they don't spend time with their kids. So recognizing the weight that I had told myself, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, like the what I had told myself is eventually he'll understand I'm doing this all for him. No, he won't. All he'll remember is my dad wasn't around. And so being able to recognize, hey, sometimes, yes, I've got to find some balance, because if I decide not to go to the office, well, then I'm going to lose my house and my son's not going to have health care. And like that I can't do. So that extreme, I'm only going to be with my son all the time, will actually be a really bad example to my son of what it looks like to navigate conflicting obligations.
Mm-hmm.
But if all I ever do is go to the office because that's what defines me, well, then it turns out I am a professor will override I am also a father, to the point where I'm a bad one, right? So part of what I tried to do in the book is remind myself how that balance is always something we're trying to figure out every day. It's not something that you get right. Again, it's not a success box check. I'm always trying to balance these things out. And some days I'm going to mess it up. Other days I'm going to get closer. But over the course and the arc of my life, am I living a life that I think would make my father proud? And am I living a life that will make my son okay with wanting to be like his father? That really does weigh heavy on me. And it's something that motivates an awful lot of how I now think about what I, will accept, what I'll do, what I won't do. I say no now to more invitations than I say yes to. Mm-hmm. And it's not because look how successful I am. It's because, those gap jumps aren't worth it for me anymore.
Yeah.
It's a matter of thinking, am I doing enough? Not can I do more? And that awareness is something that I think all of us have to figure out for ourselves in our own circumstances.
Yeah. Speaking of awareness, last excerpt, I'm going to read directly from the book because everybody else is going to have to get the book themselves. Towards the end, I love this saying, my dad is currently sitting in the room with me as I write this. There will be a time when he will be gone. For now, he is here. It is sufficient. My dad's 82 years old. And I mean, we went to pick up some burgers from when we were around the corner. The burgers weren't ready yet. And we got a beer and we're sitting at the bar and we're just cracking jokes. And I'm like, dude, I'm having a beer with my dad, 82-year-old dad at the bar, man. And right then and there, Dr. Simmons, like I was happy, man. Touch on that really quick.
That's enough. My dad is 81. He has cancer, doing very well, very healthy despite his diagnosis. And yet, as I'm sure is the case for your dad, like you get into your 80s, like things are slowing down. So my dad just this year, I was saying, hey, my son Atticus and I were going to go camping. Dad, you want to join us? And he said, I think my camping days are done. And it was like,
Yeah.
what? That can't be true, right? But it was an awareness that, you know, he pees like 7 times at night. He doesn't want to sleep in the tent and have to get, he was like, you know what, like, yeah, man, like I've gotten to the point where that's just not something.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking as I sit here in my little recording studio office at pictures of my dad and my son fishing like throughout the years, all of us out on the rivers. Recently, I said, Dad, you know, Atticus and I are going to go fishing this week. Do you want to join us? And he's like, yeah. He said, you know, I think I'm going to have to be really, really selective about where we go fishing from now on. It's because he's got neuropathy in his legs and he can't hike from the truck to a river if it's more than, you know, a few hundred yards.
Yeah.
And the awareness that the stuff we had been able to do that was so taken for granted as just part of our behavior is becoming rarer and rarer, and in some cases now impossible. That there is a kind of loss, right? There's a kind of grief that I have to navigate. But at the same time, my dad's not gone, thank God, right? And so rather than being pissed because, oh, we can't do that thing, success, check the box, go to the campsite, but I'm able to be with my dad. He's still here. We're having tea together. We're working in the garden together. My son's going over and pulling weeds with him, right? How is it that we can start recognizing, yes, sometimes the thing matters, but most times the relationship is what is the thing we have forgotten about. And so, yeah, like I feel you, man. There are times where my dad and I are, you know, I was sitting when I wrote that statement, I was sitting at a cabin up in the mountains. My dad was with me and he was like, that morning I was like, I'm going to go up and work on the book. He's like, yeah, I think I'll ride with you. So he went up, he sat across the room reading something of his own. And I was sitting there writing my book. And I came to the point where I looked over and just, we weren't even talking, but the fact that he was in the room with me was significant. And man, like, I hope that modern men are not people who become 50 and realize that their kids have never really been in the room thankful that their dad was there, right? Because the dad was out working, getting the stuff, checking the boxes. Go check the boxes. It's cool. Just don't let it be what matters to you most of all. Right. It matters to me that I've got a really cool mountain bike that keeps me safe and I've got good gear and full face helmets and all this junk that I wear. But it matters more that, you know, my son knows that he can call me whenever and I've got his back. Like it's not the things, it's the time. And that's the whole point of what's worthy of your finitude as the question of this book. Are you okay with who you're becoming? Are you responsibly aware that risk remains, and yet you're taking these risks on purpose because this is the life you want to have lived? And this will look different at different times, right? When I was 20, I didn't have kids. And so my risks look different in my 20s, right? I might have hit that gap jump. I don't know. But in my 40s, it's different now. In my 60s, well, now my body's not going to work in the same ways. And I've got to be aware of that. So recognizing that this is not a once and for all thing, it's an orientation. And over our life, we then keep navigating that orientation. The trails we walk at 20 are not the trails we walk at 40 and are not definitely the ones we're walking at 80. But movement matters. Are you still moving? Are you still living toward? And this is where I think I've mentioned this to you in the past, but the audience that has floored me in writing this book, because they just have absolutely loved it, are retired people. Never occurred to me that a book about mountain biking and trout fishing and camping and existential philosophy was going to be like vibing with the 80-year-old set. They love it. And the reason is I've had so many come to me and say things like this. When I retired, my society told me I didn't matter anymore. But that's the success logic, right? Because you matter because of your successes. Now you're not out there checking boxes. You're not making stuff happen and your hustle's over. Now you're irrelevant. Now you're useless. That's what our society tells retired people. And they say, but when I listen to you talk, when I read this book, it reminds me that faithfulness was never reducible to my job. I'm going to get out of bed every day and do the best I can to live in a direction that makes a difference. And I'm like, yes. And so they'll buy a copy for themselves and they'll buy a copy for like all their grandkids.
Yeah.
Right. Trying to save their grandkids from being 60 and feeling like their life's over because they got downsized or whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I do hope people enjoy the book because it's not a finger wagging Dr. Laura sermon. It's not preaching at them from on high. It's not standing on the mountaintop yelling to the people in the valleys. It's climbing the trails myself and trying to reach out and throw a hand to some other people I see on the trails and like, hey, y'all, we can do this better. And if we do it better, we might actually really find the contentment and joy and happiness that we've been seeking, not because we've checked boxes, but because we realized those things were always already here. We just didn't see them because we kept our eyes so narrowly focused on that entrepreneurial exit, on that first million in the bank, on that whatever. Go get those things. But man, like the joy is not on the end of that trail. The joy is the fact that you're able to keep moving right now. And that's something that I think all of us can learn and all of us can hear, even if you hate camping, whatever. Apply it to what you love.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not telling you how to live with specifics. It's telling you how to live with an invitation to really lean into what matters to you.
Philosopher, fisherman, mountain biker, husband, father, author of the book, Camping with Kierkegaard, Faithfulness as a Way of Life. Dr. Simmons, where can folks find you, connect with you, and get the book, brother?
Man, so the kind of catch-all is my website, jaronsimmons.com, but they can also find the book at Amazon. It is available now as paperback, hardback, and recently as an Audible, if people want to just listen to the book. And then also I'd try to encourage them to check out my Substack, Philosophy in the Wild. I've got paid and free subscriptions available. I encourage folks to at least think about some of the paid subscriptions because that's what's kind of helping me continue to do this philosophical work, but also then go over to YouTube at Philosophy for Where We Find Ourselves. All of these have also my email address, which is just simmonsphilosopher@gmail.com. I encourage folk to reach out to me. Let's be in conversation with each other. There's nothing more rewarding than people letting me know that they're reading the book, reading the Substack, seeing the YouTube videos, and it's encouraging them to live on purpose where they find themselves. And I would love to hear from folks as they try to navigate that. And if I can be a resource, an encouragement, a support, I'm here for them.
I love it. I love it. And I'll have those links in the show notes below. Last question, usually the heaviest one in our last minute here. What is something you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Oh, wow. I will say I have seen far too many men be assholes by thinking that their relationship to women is one that should be understood in terms of power. And what shapes my conception of manhood is a radical and robust vision of women as equal and, in many cases, able to navigate the burden of responsibility and power maybe better than me. And so I would hope for men that they would never see themselves as defined in contrast to women, but as in conversation with and in community with women.
I love that. Appreciate you, Dr. Simmons. I'm going to recap some of the insights you left along the way really quick because so much knowledge in such short time. I wish we had 2 more hours to keep on going. But starting off with, does the idea of success define your existence? Right? What is worth your finitude? The question that surrounds the book, Camping with Kierkegaard. Everything we do is risky. Our time is finite. We are not here forever. And that means that everything we choose, we are in essence choosing not to do something else. Opportunity costs. Choose on purpose your direction. Because everything we do is risky and everything we do needs intention, we must know where we're going. And we must be linked into the true direction in which we hope to head. This could kill us. Risk is real. Being aware of that risk wholeheartedly, knowing that the mountain can kill us. I love this. If we are not aware that they can break us, we should not ride them. In terms of the mountains, the edge that you seek. So drastically could be the dangerous one if you don't treat it with respect. I always say, it's not that I don't like the ocean. I respect the ocean. That's it.
That's right.
I respect the ocean. And of course, being in the game with the best. It's not about being the best.
Yeah.
It's being about being in the game with the best. So much more insight to share.
Yeah.
Dr. Simmons, thank you again. To the audience, thank you guys so much for making it to the end. We appreciate you. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with somebody else that you know can get value from it as well. And leave us a rating to let us know how we do. That's the best compliment that you can give us. And for the men listening, if you really want to get in contact, have guest speakers like Dr. Simmons and others, be sure to check out the Noble Knights group. We meet every Wednesday night. It would be great to have you in that free community of men as well. And as we always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't have the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.